February 28, 2026. Operation Epic Fury. The United States and Israel launch coordinated strikes against Iran. Within 6 days, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper declares total air and sea dominance over the Persian Gulf. 43 Iranian naval vessels are on the bottom. 3,000 targets inside Iranian territory have been struck. The Iranian drone carrier Shahid Bagheri, a 240-meter vessel commissioned less than a year ago, is burning in the Gulf after Tomahawks from USS Bainbridge gut its UAV arsenal before a single drone lifts off. And here is the detail nobody on television is talking about. The carrier doing the most damage right now, the USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, is not the one Tehran's generals are losing sleep over. Neither is the USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, which just transited the Suez Canal on March 5th and entered the Red Sea 2 days later. The carrier that is dismantling Iran's entire strategic architecture has not yet fired a single weapon. It has not entered the theater. It is still 10 days from the Eastern Mediterranean. Its air wing just finished their final pre-deployment drills off the Virginia coast. The USS George H.W. Bush, CVN-77, is the one Iran fears most. The question is why? And the answer is not about firepower. It is about geometry. If you understand why a weapon system's position matters more than its raw tonnage, type position in the comments. This channel covers what everyone else is missing. 2 carriers are already in the fight. That is not the question anyone should be asking. The USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, has been operating in the Arabian Sea since January 2026 with Carrier Air Wing 9. CVW-9's Super Hornets have been conducting sustained strike cycles against Iranian military infrastructure for 10 straight days. The Lincoln Strike Group is surrounded by at least 8 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, each carrying 90 to 96 vertical launch system cells loaded with SM-6 interceptors, SM-2s, ESS-MS, and Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles. Then the USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, arrives. The world's largest warship. 100,000 long tons, 1,106 feet of nuclear-powered flight deck. The most expensive warship ever constructed at $13.3 billion. It transits Suez on March 5th, enters the Red Sea on March 7th, and immediately expands the theater's attack surface. Every pundit on cable news runs the same analysis. 2 carriers means twice the firepower. That math is wrong, not because it miscounts aircraft, because it misunderstands what carriers are for in this fight. Iran did not build its military doctrine around being outgunned. Iran has known for 30 years that, in a conventional exchange against a U.S. Navy carrier strike group with its full suite of Aegis destroyers, EA-18G Growlers, and standard missile batteries, it loses. Every time. Decisively. Iran built its doctrine around something entirely different. Iran built its doctrine to make entry so costly, so uncertain, so tactically painful that the United States would choose not to enter. That doctrine has a name: Anti-Access/Area Denial, A2/AD. And for it to work, for any A2/AD strategy to work against a naval force, it requires one foundational assumption that its architects never had reason to question. The threat comes from one direction. Put the Strait of Hormuz on the table. At its narrowest point, it is 21 nautical miles wide. The navigable shipping lanes in each direction are 2 nautical miles. 20% of the world's oil supply moves through that channel, approximately 17 million barrels per day. Every supertanker bound for Asia, every LNG carrier bound for Europe, every product tanker serving Gulf state economies passes through a gap that a well-placed defensive battery can watch in its entirety from a single hilltop on Iran's southern coastline. Iran's entire military infrastructure along that coast is oriented around a single strategic assumption. The enemy approaches from the south and east. The Khalid Fars anti-ship ballistic missile, derived from the Fateh 110 family, 300-kilometer range, maneuvering re-entry vehicle, electro-optical terminal seeker, an accuracy claimed by the IRGC at 8.5 meters CEP, is sighted on mobile launchers along Iran's southern coastal mountain ranges. The Noor and Qadr families, sea-skimming anti-ship cruise missiles with ranges between 200 and 300 kilometers and 200-kilogram warheads, derived from the Chinese C-802, are positioned to cover the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf entrance. The Bavar 373 surface-to-air missile system, Iran's indigenous answer to the S-300, with engagement ranges approaching 300 kilometers and engagement altitudes exceeding 30 kilometers, is networked to cover ingress corridors from the Arabian Peninsula and the sea. The entire kill web was architected to answer one question: how do we stop a carrier strike group pushing north through the Gulf of Oman? Now look at the map with 3 carriers on it. USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72. Arabian Sea, Eastern Approach. Exactly where Iran's defensive architecture was designed to engage. Lincoln is the scenario Iran wargamed. Lincoln is the fight Iran prepared for. USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78. Red Sea, Southwestern Approach. Ford's air wing, operating from a position southwest of Iran, puts F/A-18 Super Hornets and EA-18G Growlers over southwestern Iranian territory via the Gulf of Aden and Yemen airspace corridors. This is not the direction the Bavar 373 batteries were optimized to face. This is not the seam the Khalid Fars fire control radar was trained on. This is not the axis Iran's Ghadir over-the-horizon radar network was designed to provide primary targeting data for. 2 carriers have already forced Iran into a defensive split. That is tactically painful. But Iran can manage a 2-axis problem. You rotate coverage. You reorient mobile launchers. You accept degraded coverage on one flank and concentrate assets on the more dangerous approach. USS George H.W. Bush, CVN-77. Inbound, Eastern Mediterranean. The Bush does not just add a 3rd attack corridor. The Bush closes the geometric trap. When CVN-77 arrives in the Eastern Mediterranean, estimated mid-March, 10 to 12 days transit from the U.S. East Coast, it places a 3rd carrier air wing in a position to strike northwestern Iran via Iraqi and Syrian airspace. The Zagros Mountains, the outskirts of Tehran, the missile production facilities in Parchin and Kojir, the IRGC Aerospace Force Command infrastructure that controls every ballistic missile Iran still has aimed at U.S. naval forces. Now run the geometry. Lincoln is east, Ford is southwest, Bush is northwest. There is no mobile launcher position in Iran that simultaneously presents its hardened rear to all 3 threat axes. There is no radar orientation that provides optimal coverage against 3 attack corridors separated by 180 degrees of compass. There is no air defense battery placement that allows a single formation to intercept inbound strikes from the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean simultaneously. The A2/AD architecture Iran spent 30 years building was designed as a one-way door. The 3rd carrier does not blow that door off its hinges. The 3rd carrier reveals that the door was only ever facing one direction. Here is where television analysts stop. Here is where we begin. The USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, does not just bring a 3rd carrier's worth of aircraft to the theater. Ford brings a fundamentally different generation of aviation tempo. A standard Nimitz-class carrier, USS Abraham Lincoln included, is designed to sustain 120 combat sorties per day under normal operational conditions. In surge, that number reaches 240.
Those figures represent the engineering ceiling of a steam catapult system designed in the 1960s. Optimized over 50 years,
and now operating at its absolute mechanical limit after 10 consecutive days of high-tempo combat strikes. The Ford does not use steam catapults. Ford's Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, EMALS, generates launch energy electrically, eliminates the requirement to produce and store massive quantities of pressurized steam, and gives flight deck operators precise control over the energy imparted to each aircraft, regardless of weight or configuration. In normal operations, Ford is designed to sustain 160 sorties per day. In wartime surge, that number reaches 270, 25% more launches per day than a Nimitz. On a flight deck reconfigured with an island positioned 140 feet further aft to maximize deck movement space, with a redesigned weapons elevator system built to accelerate munition flow from magazine to flight deck, the entire ship is an industrial machine optimized for one purpose: generating continuous combat power faster than any warship in history. The USS Abraham Lincoln's CVW-9 has been conducting strike operations since Operation Epic Fury, launched on February 28th. Those aviators are 10 days into sustained combat tempo. The SM-6 magazines aboard Lincoln's Arleigh Burke escorts have been cycling against Iranian missile salvos. That is not speculation. The IRGC claims to have launched ballistic missiles and cruise missiles at Lincoln's strike group, and while CENTCOM confirms 0 hits, they do not confirm 0 intercepts. Every SM-6 expended on an Iranian missile is one fewer in a magazine that requires a supply ship, a port, or a replenishment at sea evolution to replace. Now introduce Carrier Air Wing 7 aboard the Bush. In its 28-day pre-deployment composite training unit exercise off the U.S. East Coast, CVW-7's 9 squadrons executed 1,586 sorties. They recorded 693 daytime arrested landings and 682 nighttime landings. These are not worn aviators at day 10 of a combat deployment. These are fresh crews who just completed the most intensive carrier qualification certification the U.S. Navy runs before a wartime deployment. Their aircraft are serviced, their weapons bays are loaded, their readiness rates are at peak pre-deployment levels. 3 carrier air wings, more than 200 aircraft operating at sea. Ford pushing 160 to 270 sorties per day. Lincoln and Bush each capable of surging to 240. In a simultaneous surge, those 3 flight decks generate a combined theoretical maximum of over 700 combat sorties in a single 24-hour period. Share this with someone who thinks they understand this conflict. They don't. Not yet. Iran's entire air defense architecture, the S-300 PMU-2 batteries, the Bavar 373 systems, the third Cordad that shot down a US RQ-4 Global Hawk in 2019, the Tor M1 point defense systems protecting missile sites, was designed to manage interceptor economics against a single carrier air wing's strike package. Roughly 60 to 80 aircraft, on a single attack axis, in cycles of several hours. 700 sorties per day from 3 directions is not a larger version of that problem. It is a categorically different problem. It is a magazine drain equation that Iran's current interceptor inventory was never sized to solve. Walk through what Iran faces, one carrier at a time. With one carrier, the Lincoln in the Arabian Sea, Iran's defensive playbook functions as designed. Mobile Khalij Fars launchers orient their electro-optical seekers southeast toward the Gulf of Oman. The Noor coastal batteries register their fire control solutions against inbound surface contacts along the 21 nautical mile strait. Ghadir over-the-horizon radar provides early warning against aircraft coming from the south. Fast attack craft of the IRGC Navy pre-position in the channels between Iran's island fortress positions, Abu Musa, the Greater and Lesser Tums, to execute swarm interdiction against any surface force attempting the strait. The mine stockpile, estimated between 5,000 and 6,000 influence mines and bottom mines, deploys to pre-planned fields covering the 2 nautical mile shipping lanes. This is a coherent defensive architecture. Against one carrier pushing from the south, it generates real friction. It does not stop the carrier. It makes entry expensive. That was always the point. With 2 carriers, Lincoln east and Ford southwest, Iran faces the first structural crack in that architecture. Mobile launchers cannot simultaneously orient toward the Gulf of Oman and toward Saudi Arabia's Red Sea coastline. Mine-laying craft operating in the Strait mouth are now potentially visible and vulnerable to Ford's air wing without the protection of Iranian land-based air cover that is now being split between 2 sectors. The IRGC fast attack flotillas in the Gulf face fixed interdiction from a direction their shallow draft island fortresses were not positioned to cover. The math degrades. But Iran can still manage. Resources are finite, but they can be prioritized. The Arabian Sea approach is the primary. The Red Sea approach is the secondary. Coverage is degraded but structured. With 3 carriers, Lincoln east, Ford southwest, Bush northwest, the prioritization logic collapses entirely. The College Fars launcher that orients east to cover Lincoln is exposed to Ford's strike packages coming from the southwest. The launcher that pivots southwest to cover Ford is now broadside to Bush's strike packages inbound from the northwest. The launcher that repositions northwest to protect against Bush is now silhouetted against Lincoln's radar coverage from the east. There is no single launcher position that minimizes exposure against 3 simultaneous attack axes. This is not a firepower problem. This is a geometry problem. And geometry, unlike missile inventories, cannot be replenished at sea. Iran's Bavar 373 batteries, the crown jewel of its air defense, the system Tehran spent a decade developing as its sovereign answer to the S-300P Mu-2, face the same mathematics. A single Bavar 373 battery covers a specific engagement envelope, 300-kilometer range, a defined radar look angle, a specific threat axis. Against 1 carrier, 1 axis it manages. Against 3 carriers on 3 axes separated by 120-degree arcs, every sector it defends leaves 2 sectors undefended simultaneously. And here is the number the IRGC briefers are not mentioning to their commanders. The Bush hasn't arrived yet. CVN-77 and CVW-7's 9 squadrons are still in transit. Iran's defensive planners know exactly what happens when it does. They built their entire strategic deterrent around ensuring it would never happen. 30 years of doctrine, thousands of mines, a precision ballistic missile they advertised could hit a moving carrier within 8.5 meters. A drone carrier they commissioned last year specifically to extend one-way attack range across the Gulf. The Shahid Bagheri is on the bottom of the Gulf. The Iris Makran forward base ship is gone. 43 Iranian naval vessels are wreckage. The architecture Iran built to deny entry from one direction has been functionally dismantled, and the asset that completes the geometric trap has not yet fired a weapon. Subscribe to Navy Decoded. We do not sell narratives here. We sell engineering. So close the loop. Go back to the question we started with. Why is the George H.W. Bush CVN-77 Carrier Air Wing 7, 9 squadrons, 2,400 sailors and aviators who just executed 1,586 sorties in 28 days of pre-deployment drills, currently closing on the eastern Mediterranean at 30 knots? Why is it the carrier Iran fears most, when 2 carriers are already in the fight and already winning? Because the first carrier proves you can enter the theater. The second carrier proves you can fight from multiple directions. The third carrier proves you have solved the geometry. Iran's A2/AD doctrine was not a military blunder. It was an intelligent, asymmetric response to a conventional power gap that Iran could not close by any other means. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles wide. The shipping lanes are 2 miles. The entire geography of the Persian Gulf funnels any naval approach into a single axis, south to north, that Iran spent 3 decades arming, mining, and fortifying. Against a single carrier strike group, that doctrine generates genuine friction. Against 2, it begins to fracture. Against 3 operating simultaneously from 3 cardinal points of the compass, it does not lose. It dissolves. The Bush does not threaten to add more sorties to an already overwhelming air campaign. The Bush threatens to make the entire concept of a directional defense irrelevant. This is the doctrine lesson every adversary watching Operation Epic Fury is absorbing right now. Mass is what amateurs worship. Position is what engineers build. Iran built mass. Mines, missiles, fast attack craft, drone carriers, concentrated along one vector. The United States built position. 3 carrier strike groups on 3 axes, and the mass became irrelevant before the 3rd carrier fired a single round. When CVN-77 clears the Strait of Gibraltar and comes into range of Eastern Mediterranean operating areas, the geometric trap closes completely. Not because the Bush adds more aircraft, more VLS cells, more interceptor capacity to an already overwhelming force, but because it removes the last remaining assumption that Iran's entire 30-year defensive architecture was built upon. The assumption that the threat always comes from the south. It no longer does.
If this changes how you understand naval warfare, share it with someone who needs to see this equation. And subscribe to Decoding Defense, because the next time a carrier moves, you will understand exactly what it means before the headlines do.
The 3rd carrier has not yet arrived. The trap is not yet closed. But the geometry is already complete, and Tehran's engineers know it. That is why it is the one Iran fears most.